name is Robert Thiemann. I'm the founder of Frame. Welcome to Frame Live. And this edition of Frame Live is dedicated to the Frame Awards. It's the first ever jury session taking place. We have a selection of the jury panel here on Zoom. And we're going to discuss the winning entries of the month of September. And let me first introduce you the jury members that we have here. I will show them all. There's Jelle too. So maybe Matteo, you can kick off.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. My name is Matteo Renna, and I'm a designer based in Amsterdam. I work with Rituals Cosmetics, and I work in the concept and the new development team, and also founder of my own design firm. And I'm really happy that I was part of this judging process of the interior of the month of September.
Thank you, Matteo. Justin.
Thanks.
Hello, everybody. My name's Justin. I'm the founding partner of MDO. I'm an architect originally from the UK, but I've been in China for 10 years, where I started MDO with my wife. We do interior and architecture, mostly in China. We really love Frame. We've been big followers for a long time. And we also won in 2018 the best use of lighting for one of our projects. So it's nice to be judging and be on the other side. And we look forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Justin. Royce, how are you?
Hi, everybody. I'm Royce Epstein. I am the A&D Design Director with Mohawk Group. We are one of the largest flooring and carpet manufacturers in the world, based in Georgia. I live in Philadelphia. I'm what's called a recovering interior designer. I was an interior designer for 20 years and now practice product development, where I help lead our design vision for Mohawk Group. And I'm really excited to be on the jury with everybody here today.
Thank you, Royce. Shannon.
Hi, everyone. I'm Shannon Pringle. I'm with Bernardin Architects out of Westchester, Pennsylvania. I'm actually very close to Philadelphia, where Royce is. So yeah, I'm an interior designer, by the way. Yeah.
Thank you. Florian.
Hi, everyone. My name is Florian. I'm the design manager of Lavazza, which means I'm currently responsible for all the product design of the Italian coffee roaster, including coffee machines and some of the packaging. I have a background in building construction, and I was a senior exterior designer with Fiat. So my background is actually quite, how to say this, is not, I'm not an interior designer, I'm not a practicing architect. So I'm approaching this whole thing a bit from a product design perspective. And it has really been a very interesting experience for me. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Florian. And Jelle, please introduce yourself.
I am, good afternoon, and good evening and good morning as well, sorry. Multiple time zones. I'm design director at Adidas. I've been working on future retail concepts over the last 5 years, been involved in some large flagship stores all around the world, in New York, but also in London, and small boutiques, one in Beijing and one store factory boutique in Berlin. I was also working in the coffee industry for Starbucks a long time ago. So I'm originally an architect by trade. I think I've been reading a magazine since 2012, so I'm a big fan, and I'm very happy and I'm very honored to be part of this jury.
Thank you, Jelle. Thank you all. Well, thank you all for reviewing roughly around 150 projects from all over the world in all kinds of categories. We asked you to look at their innovation, functionality, creativity, and sustainability aspects. And it was also possible for you to comment on the projects. You reviewed these projects in the best possible manner. You did that on almost daily basis. It's been a huge task for you. Lots of respect for that. We are very happy with the result, and we have already revealed the winning projects of September, and we will lead you through them, and the jury panel will then comment and say why they think these projects deserved to be the winning projects. But before we do that, I'll share with you the entire program. So we will discuss the interior of the month first, then speak about the honorable mentions, then look at some trends that the jury has seen. And last but certainly not least, that's where you, the audience, is coming in. You can ask some questions to the jury. If you don't have any questions, that's not a big deal. I have a lot. So that's the program for today. So back to the jury. Guys, are you ready to have a look at the winning projects?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Before we do that, this is the entire jury panel. So 15 people from all over the world. We have been looking for balance in all kinds of ways in terms of nationalities and cultures, gender, age, race, job role. Well, you name it. It's a very diverse jury, and we are proud of that. And we think that's the way forward for this industry, to be as inclusive as possible, as diverse as possible. And we want to really contribute to make that happen. These people are with us today, and I have to excuse Judith, PC, and Simona for not being here today. Well, I'm very happy that the rest is. Let's speak about the winning projects, and that's Maggie's Center by Heatherwick Studio. It's a healthcare center. More literally, it's taking care of cancer patients. And here are some images that I would like to share with the rest of you. And yeah, jury, tell us, what did you like about this project? And please think of its innovative qualities, creative aspects, functionality, and sustainability.
I think first and foremost for this project, the curvature and the curvature of the architecture was really impressive. And if you look really close, I think that's concrete structures that are going from the floor to the ceiling and just stretching across the ceiling, which was, like I said, it was very impressive and very in awe in the space. I think something that's, also stands out a lot is the sustainability of this project. The use of concrete flooring, the use of a lot of woods, lots of trees, lots of plants in this space, a lot of natural light, which I would think that a cancer patient would need, is lots of natural light, lots of nature. I think that's probably a part of their, part of their recovery, or, whatever they're going through is not going to be as bad because they have a lot of this natural light coming in, a lot of that greenery.
Royce,
Yeah.
you had some very specific comments on the project, I remember.
Yes, I'm actually a cancer survivor for 6 years now, and I have spent a lot of time in cancer hospitals. And so I felt very connected personally to this project. I think Sharon is right in a lot of ways, like architectural space can actually be demoralizing to people, especially if there isn't natural light and there isn't any connection to some of the more humane aspects of our culture. So when I looked at this project, and I also scored it, it was one of the highest scoring projects, I think, obviously for all of the jury, since it's our winner. But I did think it was an outstanding project, just thinking about the patient experience and what they would gain from just being in this space. It was very thoughtful, like the way, again, the form, the materiality, the natural light, but it also like brought everything down as well to kind of a human-centered level. Like these people don't seem dwarfed in this space, which is easy to do when you have very, biomorphic shapes. Everything seems very grounded. And, you know, we're going to talk about trends a little bit later, but for me, this really represented a trend that we're seeing today, which is this idea of returning to humanity. And how do we get back this sensation of feeling safe and grounded? And when you're in a cancer hospital, that's one of the most important, I think, sentiments that you want to convey. So I just thought this project really hit that mark. You know, they considered the patient experience through biophilia, really bringing this sense of nature indoors, and not just literally through plants and through lighting, but through form and again through materiality. So it's very nurturing, and I also thought very aspirational for the people that go there.
Thank you, Royce. Anybody else who would like to add to this?
I think Matteo wanted to go.
No, I completely followed the conversation from Royce and Shannon, and I think this is a great example of how we should consider nature when designing and including in our project. And what I really like also from the architect is the thinking of the people and of the visitors in the choosing of the materials. So I remember one thing from the description about this cork table in the kitchen area that was really warm and can really give the feeling of having a warm place to have a drink, to have a coffee, to have a tea. So I really like the choose of sustainability and choose of warm and really material that can give something to the visitors.
Thank you, Matteo.
Me, I would like to point out two things that I think we should still consider when talking about this project. One is where it has been set up, where it is constructed. And I was quite thankful because this was one of the first projects that actually also had a video uploaded that allowed us to go a little bit beyond the photos. And you could see how the space and the looked like before the whole thing was erected. And it looked almost like a lost green patch within the area. It didn't look particularly friendly, useful or anything. It almost looked like a forgotten place that they didn't really know what to do with. But then you could see how they kind of constructed and built the place, and it really is an improvement of the place. So they didn't remove one of the few green patches in the area, but they kind of multiplied it and made it grow. And so the whole building, the whole structure, you can see how it really almost grows out of the ground with this vertical lamella structure. And I really like how the structural elements of this building really are visible and tell the story of how the forces are guided to the ground. So I think you can really get a feeling of how everything is grounded. to hark back to Joyce's to Royce's comments before.
Mm-hmm.
So that's basically the two things that I want to say, like the place where it has been built and how the structure is really an integral part of the aesthetics of this interior space.
Thank you, Florian.
Yeah, I'd like to add that the Maggie Center program is quite interesting. There's probably, 7 or 8 different Maggie Centers which have been commissioned by Charles Jenks for his wife, who died of cancer, and he asked his architect friends to produce them. So he's asked a lot of very famous architects, OMA, Zaha Hadid, Stephen Hull, to produce them. And sometimes I find in the past, they've kind of been slightly vanity projects. They're more about the designer. But this one really feels like, as everyone else has mentioned, a space is really designed with the user in mind. And, it doesn't feel like a traditional hospital space. It feels very comfortable, very inviting. And, coming from the UK, when I see the landscape outside, it's almost like a kind of enchanted garden, an illustration from a kid's book. So it's pretty magical. And I think it really stood out amongst all of the other 150 entries we saw.
Thank you, Justin. And then Jelle, you've probably something to add, but it's difficult to make a new point, I guess.
Well, I do believe the first time when I saw the project, I really saw that sustainability and creativity was going hand in hand. I think with a lot of other projects, you always have the idea that sustainability comes in as an afterthought. And I think this project is super inspiring, and therefore it's actually using nature as inspiration and becomes also sustainable. And also, I really like the idea of giving the green back to the hospital. So it's not only looking into the users internally, but also the users in the university hospital.
Very good point, Jelle. Thank you. Yeah, so that's Maggie Center by Heatherwick Studio, the winning project of the month of September. A last word about this project, or did you say it all? Here you see the integral use of nature in the project. Yeah, I must say it's quite stunning. Let's move on to the honorable mentions. One is for the UABB Longgang Exhibition Hall, and that is a project in China. It has been submitted in 2 categories, exhibitions and best use of light. And in both categories, it scored really, really high. And I'm interested to hear from you guys what you liked about it, what stood out for you.
I had the word wow when I first saw this. I thought this was an amazing intervention of a single gesture that gives 3 bits of function to the space. So not only is it lighting the space, but it's creating wayfinding, and it's also creating gallery space, which was the original intent. So I just thought, it's such a simple concept, and yet it's so powerful because of that singular gesture.
Thanks, Royce.
Add one small thing. I think it really seems like a living organism that spread in space. So that's really something that was really stunning for me. So you see, there is also this, in the terms of light, there is this opposite of the dark space and industrial space around, and this incredible line of white light spreading into that. And of course, that makes wayfinding, and is also space to exhibit. So instead of having tables or having other items around, they use these walls as also exhibit space. So that was really nice for me to see.
What I thought interesting is that, especially on projects like exhibitions, I find that, like, this is not a comment on the project, but more in general, that it's sometimes really tricky to appreciate the impact that an exhibition or a space can have, because obviously this is a very striking space. It's big, it's dark, and it uses one single gesture to create this experience. But it's really tricky for us on the jury side to actually really appreciate an exhibition space like that. But in general, as Matteo and Roy said before, it's I think what makes it so special is that it really only uses 2 ingredients. It uses darkness and light to create a space, and that's awesome.
Yeah, to kind of concur with that. I mean, from a lighting point of view, what's great about it is only one light source, and it's not like a spotlight shining on an object. The object itself is self-illuminated. So, from a lighting point of view, it's kind of pretty brave, because there's no other lighting. It just uses the form as a kind of armature of light. So, it's quite poetic. It's quite pure in its execution of lighting. And I think that's why, for me, it scored so highly. I think also it's quite nice, just the dialogue between this old building, which they've just not touched, and then, there's one single gesture. I think that's, to be honest, in awards, like, this is the kind of thing I look for, a really kind of clean, concise idea that's well executed. So it's a great example.
Jelle, does this offer any form of inspiration for retail design? I mean, retail design is moving into this experiential mode, and this is an experience. So can you take cues from this that are actually actionable for retail design?
Yeah, I totally agree in what everybody said. I think the contrast between light and dark really helps, and it also helps that with one light source you only have one focus in the space. But I think to do something in such a beautiful old space and big space like this also really helps, and it also sets the dialogue between old and new. And I think like moving into retail design, or at least in Adidas, we try to incorporate as much as possible of the existing. So you always have that dialogue between old and new moving forward. I think that's one of the trends we're looking into and what we have done in the past. And I think this is just a beautiful example of, or a big example how you can do it, like with very focused elements, creating a very impressive experience.
I think this project is done in China. Shannon, can you imagine this kind of project to happen in the United States?
I think so. My only concern is that, can you fully see all of the art installations? That would be my only thing, is just making sure that every angle of that art installation is able to be experienced. But yeah, I thought this was a really interesting project.
And Matteo, last word for you.
Yeah, I think in terms of retail design, I totally agree that we should go in that direction. So on finding a linear experience, especially now with COVID, to find a way to go on a linear story and linear experience in store. In terms of exhibitions, I really like the spatial arrangement of these exhibitions. I'm also curious to see really the content, because I can evaluate an exhibition for the space, for the interior, but it's also really interesting to look at content. And if the storyline is really, the visitor really gets that or not. So I really scored, I think this project is really high in terms of space, but it's interesting for me to look also in terms of content and storyline.
Thank you, Matteo. One last word for anybody, or shall we move on?
I think I just want to mention that, that single moment of lighting in a space like this can really make all the difference between the user's experience. You mentioned, especially with retail and sensory experience. I mean, I've been to a lot of art exhibits that are in warehouses and things, and I'm always noticing like how physically cold it is. Like the concrete is cold and the space hasn't been, heated, or maybe you're not getting natural sunlight. So I think even the singular lighting gesture is giving you the perceived emotion of warmth, even if the physical warmth may not be present. So I think that's important to note too for the user experience.
Thank you, Royce. So we've been looking at a project with one single gesture, actually, and that's the use of light. So that's also why it got such high marks from you in that category. Let's move on to the next honorable mention, and that is for a bar called Gusto 501. It's based in, I think, Toronto, designed by Partisans, and you liked its use of material.
I'm going to jump in. I have a secret crush on terracotta, and this is just an awesome use. I found the initial, like the small tiny image that we see in the gallery when we start to judge it. I thought it was slightly underwhelming, and I didn't expect anything. But then the more images I looked at, the more intriguing and the more wow effect it gave me, because. First of all, it's an incredible space with lots of natural light coming in, flooding in from the top, and then it has this wall space that is almost like a vertical landscape made of terracotta and integrated lights in there. And and if you really dive in and looked at all the process they went through, it's like it was all created digitally before they set it up. So they made sure that everything is exactly the way it should be. So incredible amount of attention to detail that I'm not necessarily used to in architecture very often, sadly. And so I really loved that project.
I would agree with you, Florian. This was one of my favorites. I also like the picture that they showed of the mock-up that they did for that terracotta lighting lit wall. I think they really paid attention to detail on that wall and making sure that this was something that could actually be built and how it was going to be built and how it was going to be managed. I think that you forget that this is a restaurant. It's almost like this is an art gallery in itself. And that you're made to focus on this back wall, but also there are so many other parts to this building that have an interest. Even the wood slat wall to the left side is interesting in itself, but it doesn't take away from that feature wall. I think that everything else is kind of a subtle background to that feature wall, and it was very well done. And it's also very sustainable in using wood and using the concrete and the metal and the terracotta.
Thanks, Shannon.
And I'll stick to the theme that I've been on about return to humanity. I mean, the choice of terracotta, I think, was spot on for today. You know, it is such an earthy material, and it's so warm. I mean, the color is physically warm. And we can't forget that this project is in Toronto, where it's cold and snowy most of the time. So to me, this project also looks like a beacon, like a flickering, you know, flame on a candle that, like, you know, attracts people to go to so they can, you know, enjoy, you know, some food and some liquid libations, you know, at the bar, but at the same time have this feeling of, like, you know, being beckoned to a warm space that you know, you might not see otherwise in Toronto. And you know, I've eaten at a lot of places in Toronto. They have a really thriving, amazing restaurant scene, and so I feel like this particular restaurant really would, you know, flourish in that environment as well. I think that should be noted.
Yeah, all of you judged or most of you judged the use of material higher than well, it being a restaurant. So does that mean that as a hospitality experience, it is not as interesting in itself?
It's on the content, on the coffee they serve, I would suggest.
I actually think that it's causing the space to have more engagement. Today, with us being so distracted by our phones and everything else around us, to be able to walk into this space and take a moment, there's no way that you're going to walk into this space and not focus on that space versus everything else around you. And I think that is the point, is to put everything down and to just be in the space and to enjoy it.
I think what is interesting is that the architect also included like a section of the restaurant. And I think what is interesting is that the kitchen is actually hovering above the restaurant. So although the material is connecting the space together as one, I think what is interesting is that the wooden slats are wrapping around the kitchen and is allowing some diversity within that space. And it's just a different way of building up a restaurant where you typically have the front of house and the back of house. And I think that was very helpful that they included this section to also understand why they used the material in that way.
Thank you, Jelle.
Yeah, I agree. It's nice to see the kind of process, the designer, you know, explain how they got to this point and how, you know, they had to work with the supplier to kind of develop this. I think, you know, a comment I would have on a lot of the other submissions is you only ever saw the final image. And design is so much more than just the final product. It's the story, it's the process. So it's nice to see something that really focused on that.
Yeah, and I think too, you can argue that this terracotta wall with the lighting embedded is even an element of craft. because the process was so integrated and the material really speaks to the hand, and it is so warm. I mean, it literally is clay.
Now, why is that important, that it's an element of craft?
Because I think, like, and Shannon hit on this, we touch glass and look at glass all day long on our phones and our devices, our computers, and we need to engage with elements of nature to feel human again and to feel, alive again. At least I do. And I think this is a major trend that we've been seeing. And it's only gonna, increase now with COVID, the fact that we're literally having meetings all day on our computers. We need to connect to the earth, and this is literally one way that we can do that.
Very true. Thank you, Royce. Matteo, last word?
Yeah, in general, I think, I'm amazed by the complexity but the simplicity also, and the elegance of the material. So the process is complex, maybe the technology is complex, but the material itself is really elegant and really natural. But I also liked the same of the past project. This is one gesture. So we are, as also Royce was saying, we are always constantly confused by a lot of things happening around us, from phone, computers, and everything. And it's nice to be in a space where you can concentrate in one big gesture. There is a really beautiful walls in terracotta, and it's shadows and lighting. So that's what I liked also to see in this project.
Thank you, Matteo. So let's move on to the last honorable mention, and that's a large apartment to be precise, designed by Batek Architekten in Berlin. Something completely different, or not?
Definitely, yes. I think it's quite interesting also to see the contrast between quite geometric spaces and how they are softened up with a pastel color palette, and also with the lighting, and also with the choice of materials. In this case, it's I think spruce or something. The use of materials and color and light is used to soften the otherwise quite geometric and harsh space, and that's what really spoke to me.
Thank you, Florian.
Yeah, it's so nice to see a project. Again, it's got a really clear concept, very well described in the submission. It was great to see a plan to explain what was going on. But it feels like the concept and the detail kind of follow through this idea of the new intervention. It doesn't really touch the existing structure. You can really read new and old. And I think that came through sort of super well with these timber boxes. It'd be nice to see some furniture in it, I think there's a kind of tendency in these kind of photography to kind of miss out either furniture or, kind of products, maybe because the designers want to kind of, show off the spatial qualities. But, at the end of the day, it's a home. So it'd be great to see just a little bit more kind of sense of domestication.
Thanks, Justin.
I like the simple use of materials though too, reminding us that we can use regular pine woods or local woods that grow, in that area, or using concrete. So I really thought that was a good use of the space, is just keeping it simple.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, one thing that for me was really popping up was this concept of the house in house. This using these volumes to create a more private space in a public space, let's say, open space like a loft. And also the playful ideas of having a sort of village into the loft was really interesting for me. That's how the architect was describing it. So using these volumes to create more private spaces and creating like small roofs and things like that. They were like really thinking of creating a village inside a house. And that for me was a nice creative way.
I agree with you, Matteo. I thought that was one of the more appealing parts of the project. And now that we're living during COVID and a lot of us are sharing our homes / offices with our families, you know, we really crave compartmentalized private space, a home within a home. So I think a lot of people really need this today. I think it would be hard, you know, to be living in one large room with a family, for example. So knowing that everyone has their own space that serves different functions, I think is really important. But the use of materials to create the sort of home within a home, I think is also important to make it feel unified, as if it is truly one village or one home. And I think that the wood and the very soft color palette really serves that well in this project.
But you can't be happy with no flooring at all. I mean, it's just, it's
That's a whole other conversation. Eventually, concrete's going to be too cold. And yes, people will need some soft surfaces or some other hard surfaces to warm it up. But yes.
But I think that's actually very interesting with the project, that you have the old industrial building with the concrete floor, but then you also have the pine wood that is untouched or not painted. And therefore, you really think that material is even more soft and more human-centric in a way. I think that's appealing to me, that it becomes even more personal rather than very prestige. I mean, with all the other projects, I think using humble materials in a very abstract way is very nice.
Yeah, and we had a few projects to judge like that. And I think that for the most part, they were all very successful in offering that sense of humility and really domesticity.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, in some of the pictures, you can even still see the screws exposed. And I think that's actually really interesting, is to have that exposed construction, even though in all the pictures, it looks super beautiful and super abstract and refined.
I think it's also a good example of how important attention to detail or good detailing in general is, because it would be really tricky to create a space like this that has this this creates this impression of precision and cleanliness if you don't have the detailing under control. So with be it the power socket or the fixtures of the door, everything is very clean, but it's easy to aim for that. It's much more difficult to actually achieve it. So I appreciate that a lot.
Thanks, Florian. And I think that was all we have to say about the winning projects. Now I would like to have a more general conversation about, let's say, the prevailing trends that you've seen while looking at those 150 odd projects. And Royce, you've been speaking about human-centric spaces a lot. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I think the term I've been using for the last year is return to humanity, because you know, we have been living through this digital revolution over the last 20, 25 years. And, you know, we're starting to become so overwhelmed with just technology and being consumed by, you know, the data on our phones. And we're, you know, what's the word I want to use? Swiping all day and scrolling and just constantly consumed on the screen. And I think humans have forgotten that we are nature. We belong to nature, and our senses need to be engaged with nature. That's what they crave. And so we're starting to see this trend. And I think it's been going on for a number of years now, where in all aspects of design, you know, we need to re-engage all of our senses, especially touch. So we're seeing a lot of textures that are very tactile, or we're seeing, you know, just like the spruce wood that we saw, where we saw it unfinished, where you see the wood graining and the cathedrals and the knots, reminding us that we are literally living with nature. And so one of the things I noticed in a lot of the projects that we judged was this idea that, and it can be expressed in a lot of different ways, but this idea that we do need to feel grounded and return to our senses in a very primal human way. And what does that look like? And we've seen that with a lot of projects. You know, we judged a lot of projects that had very sort of biomorphic forms, like you saw that in the Maggie's project. But a lot of the projects that we saw were done with concrete and using these very heavy solid materials, or terrazzo is another good example, And to me, that's sort of the antithesis of the scrolling and the 24/7 streaming. You know, we need things in our daily lives, and obviously we get that from the built environment, that ground us and that make us feel connected to the earth, physically connected to the earth. And I think these heavier materials have made a huge comeback because of that. They are sort of like the anti-iPhone, not to make fun of the iPhone, we all can't live without ours, but we're seeing the damage that you know, technology and this 24/7 streaming has done. So I think it's being expressed a lot through form, but also through materiality as well.
What strikes me when listening to you, when you explain why you like these winning projects, is that you seem to like simple, strong gestures. One, strong use of material, strong use of light. So let's say you like simplicity. You like to get away from complexity. Could that be called a trend? And why is that? Why do you like so much simplicity?
I don't necessarily think of it as complexity versus simplicity. I just think of it more as, you know, sort of like our primal connections. It's funny because like recently I did my DNA test and I found out that I'm a little bit Neanderthal, which was like quite shocking actually, because we all think of ourselves as very cool and futuristic and like working and living and designing for the future. And then, you know, when you get your DNA results, you're like, wow, I'm connected to humanity over millions of years. And that's kind of mind blowing. And I think that, you know, that's what I'm talking about, is like, we want to feel something different than the overwhelming, you know, like beckoning of the future. Like I want to take a step back. And this is why the slow movement, I'm sure everyone has experienced the slow movement in some way, whether it's, you know, in slow fashion or slow food. But people are really craving this element of slowing down and just getting back to basics. And, you know, yeah. I guess maybe the word basic can be tied to simplicity, but I don't necessarily think of it as like a Star Wars epic battle between simplicity and complexity. I mean, I think there are things that are natural that are complex, like fractals. We can look at fractals and have calm, like we have physiological responses when we see things in nature like fractals, even though they are complex. So I think there's a lot to it. And but yes, I think your assessment is correct that I am attracted to those things. Yeah.
But in general, I think it strikes a general chord. It's like the future can be quite a scary place, and it's getting ever more complex. Like I don't know, COVID, Brexit. There's this bombardment of stuff that is completely out of our control, and it's like spinning crazily around. Like everything is spinning out of control, and it's not only architecture, interior design. Like me coming from transportation design, from car design, like this whole. You can link the retro trend and the SUV trend. You can link those to this desire to actually like slow down and protect yourself and really try to control what you can. So it's a really innate desire that we really want to kind of protect ourselves, and that's we see this pop up throughout our cultural products, I guess.
That's a good way to describe it. Like, I do think it is innate, for sure.
I actually think it's interesting that I think that from these different projects, we see a connection to nature, but nature isn't something that we control. If anything, we've seen that it is not controlled by us at all, but we feel a connection to it. And I think that there's a familiarity to nature that comforts us. And so that might be why we are attracted to the projects that have a more natural feeling to it.
Actually, there's a question about that project, and I think it's a good question. It's from Richard Dunsen, and it's about this winning project, so the project of the month. He says, you talk about sustainability, but in which way is it sustainable? Because the only thing I recognized from the pictures is that they used a lot of wood in the interior, but by the way, it is built, it's not reusable. So in what sense is it sustainable? He also says outside there is a lot of green, lots of nature, and inside there are just some plants in pots at some places. So it's not an integral use of greenery, it's not an integration of nature inside. So what do you have to say about that? Is the project as sustainable as it looks to be?
I'm going to start off by saying conceptually it is sustainable in the sense that like the code category of sustainability was not only, as far as I understood, it was not only focused on the immediate built impact of a structure, but also on the impact it had on society and the longevity of the whole intervention. So this obviously has a starting advantage, being like a place to cure cancer patients. So its course full points on that meta level of sustainability. And then for the build structure, I think it did not remove a green spot in the area, but it really tried to improve and maximize something that was already there, but was almost like a left aside spot area. And then for the buildings construction themselves, it's a tricky bit because we need to judge with the information we are giving. So I don't have any visibility if there are any leads, certificates or anything. But I would say, given that it appeared to be a structure made from engineered timber, I think the starting point would be quite good as well in this area. But I would want to hear some of the proper architects to jump in on that.
Jelle, perhaps?
Yeah. It uses a, just reading the text here, a prefabricated timber structure, which is made out of sustainably forest spruce. So the whole structure is green compared to using something that's made out of steel or concrete.
Or drywall.
So I think that's a big one. I think also we've kind of mentioned, there's a lot of daylight in the space. So, a lot of hospital spaces are traditionally kind of artificially lit. This is a place that probably you don't need to have the daylight on for that much. So the artificial lighting on for that much. You can rely on this beautiful daylight to go through. Then it's covered in plants. So, it's going to be, it's not contributing to the urban heat island effect. It's a green roof. It's going to have a place for biodiversity, for bugs and birds and animals to come. I think as far as a building goes, it's trying to hit all the spots. And as we said before, conceptually, it's a place about healing, which is one of the most sustainable things you can possibly do.
So it's important to make a distinction between sustainable use of materials and, let's say, sustainability at large, because sustainability can come in many shapes and forms, not only in the shape of materials. I do think, however, that the person who asked the question has a fair point when it comes to the use of greenery inside. Merely by putting some plants and pots inside, I mean, if you look at the way the exterior is really literally covered in green, that could have been taken a little bit further inside, would be my comments.
I think, though, that something that designers and architects, we try and think about when we're designing these spaces is how is it going to be maintained? So I feel like 2 or 3 years ago, it was all about the green wall and, this having this huge green wall in a space or having this form in an interior space, but couldn't be managed. So I felt like I would go into, a newly designed space and see a big green wall or a sculptural piece, and it was dying because it couldn't be maintained. Because when we started to look at the technical parts of it, how is this going to be maintained on a daily basis? We know that with plants and such, those are things that are more easily maintainable. And I think we have to think about the simple parts of that is what can be maintained. What's realistic?
Especially in a place like this, who wants to see a dying green wall in a cancer hospital? That
Yeah,
would be
that's
like.
So we've had to think that in the past couple of years is what can be maintainable.
Yeah, and I think to add to that, you know, one of the new words I've been adding to my definition of sustainability is regeneration, because, you know, we're at this point of climate crisis where we literally could become like the 6th mass extinction. So we have to start thinking about regeneration. And so, you know, even small, I'm going to use that word again, gestures, even these small gestures of having a plant. I mean, a plant has a function. Like when we breathe, we're exhaling carbon dioxide. The plant is taking that in, right? So we're trying, you know, in a very basic way, you can offset your carbon footprint, just human to plant. I mean, it's literally that simple. So yes, it's a trend, and yes, they're popular, and everywhere, like Urban Outfitters and whatever is selling plants now. And maybe that's why it seems so silly, but at the same time, you know, they have a very real function that, you know, and they were, you know, they're part of our, again, this symbiosis of humans to our planet, and we have to recognize that. And to Sharon's point, I mean, I have been in many a building with these green walls that, you know, they're like, they haven't been maintained, and they're either half dead, or there's like, there's too much water and it's moldy, and then you're getting, you know, sick building syndrome. So there does have to be a really good balance of how to manage that. So I think, you know, getting back to this idea of regeneration, like, you know, the built environment should contribute to human health and wellness in a way that we are also contributing that back. It's a symbiotic relationship.
Speaking about health, many, if not all of the projects you have been looking at over the past month have been designed and built pre-COVID. So with COVID in mind and going forward, I mean, the US, Europe, we are not there yet. China might be there. Going forward, how would these projects need to change to be COVID-proof?
I think one things that I really, I was telling to you before, during the judging process, I was really thinking, wow, this was the word a few months ago, and now we are in a completely different thinking. But at the same time, I was really missing and say, I really want to go back in one of this place. So when you look at these beautiful spaces, you cannot think about the future of, okay, in the future we cannot have public space, we cannot meet in a restaurant, we can no, that will not work, because we really need that. So I think it will be good to think about intimacy for the future. So of course, thinking a space that can give you place to have your intimacy, but investing more on make these spaces safe, because people need to go back to meet each other and need to go back to feel each other.
Yeah, and they need to be emotionally safe, not just physically safe. I think that's important.
What do you mean with that?
I think when people walk into an environment, they need to, you know, they're obviously going to look around, and they need to see things that are going to calm their fears. So whether that be, you know, screen, I'm not suggesting that they're screens, because you know, the jury is out on plexiglass and all of that, but I think people need to see these let's just call them visual cues that will make them feel like it's safe to be here. Like, we're going to all need really good reasons to go out in the world and to go back to the office. So what is that really good reason? So is it going to be, you know, having these, you know, intimate moments with coworkers, but what does that look like that I can feel safe to do that? I think that's the question.
Back in March, I had a meeting with a big developer here in China, and their construction sites were paused, and they were looking at ways in which they could make the product, the apartment, more sellable in the times of COVID. So it was looking about, you know, creating a space when you come in to be able to wash your hands, or how we could look at the lifts, or any kind of space that people share. So the front door, a toilet door, you know, a lift button, thinking about how we could design out that so people could feel more safe. But that was back in March. And now, you know, just a kind of beacon of hope. life's kind of back to normal here in China. You know, everyone is going out without masks, going to dinner, meeting their friends, having fun. And actually, the world hasn't really changed. You know, it's kind of like it was. I mean, we're kind of more cautious, but it feels like it's kind of back to normal. You know, and I read these opinion pieces about, you know, will life ever return to what it was like before? You know, that everything's, it's a big sea change, everything's going to change, but I've not seen it here. It feels like, yeah, it's business as usual.
I just returned from the Netherlands back to Germany. I'm in quarantine for 14 days, and I've been thinking about your question for quite a while. But I think the only reason for me wanted to go out is to meet people or to make that experience count, to really go beyond that risk of getting COVID. I actually had my wedding 2 weeks ago. And one person actually was tested for COVID. And then within literally 6 hours, 3 people were tested. And we only were with 8 people in total. And I think, like, if you are in this part of the world, you are confronted with so many new experiences and journeys. And I think, like, taking that Thomas Heatherwick, the Maggie Leeds design as an example, that for me would be like #1 on my list of places to visit, because for me that place has a purpose to make people better, and I think that for me is the most important thing. I would not necessarily go to a space where they consider like 1.5 meters or there's 30 people or 50 people. I think like every experience outdoors should make it count for me, and that for me would definitely be important. I think you mentioned like they're trying to make buildings safe. The city of Rotterdam, the building of the city of Rotterdam has been empty for 6 months because they did a calculation. If the elevators were all used and they can only use 2 people per elevator, it will take them the entire day to use that building. So I think there are elements that we should consider, maybe high-rise versus low-rise buildings, and definitely like bringing back nature is something that's definitely part of everything, I guess.
Thank you, Jelle. Wise words. And it's interesting to know, but that's not for today, what the rest of the world can learn from China when it comes to, well, how do you say, fighting COVID. There seems to be no crisis anymore in China, while the rest of the world is in a heavy crisis. So you must be doing something right in China. And I think lots of us would like to know what exactly that is. But again, this is for a different stage, a different day and time. Now we're at the end of this session. I want to thank you very, very much for being with us and sharing your expert knowledge about interior design with our audience. I learned a lot from you. Things I took away, I just made some notes while you were talking, is going back to humanity, designed for human beings, make experiences count, include nature in the best way possible, and stretch the word sustainability as far as possible beyond material use, but also in terms of longevity of a certain project and what it can mean to certain parts of communities, of society in general. So while we were talking about these winning projects today, we touched upon many, I would say, key issues that every interior designer and every brand catering to an audience in terms of having retail experiences or offices should listen to. I hope they did. We have been broadcasting this on Zoom and on Facebook Live. There will be a recording, however, available later on, also on the Frame website, on YouTube, and again on Facebook. So the word will be spread. Be sure of that. September jury, representation of the September jury. Thank you very much for being with us. We are moving into October. So the October jury is completely different and has started for new projects that were submitted to us. A session like this will take place early November, the first Tuesday of November, again, 4 o'clock Central European time, with a different group of people and different projects, but hopefully with the same kind of super interesting discussion. Before we get there, I must mention that next Thursday, this Thursday, 4 o'clock Central European time, I will be talking to Nathalie Cañas del Pozo. She is the co-founder and creative director of El Equipo Creativo, based in Barcelona, specializing in hospitality projects for the most creative entrepreneurs of Spain. Award-winning studio, lots of interesting words. We will take a deep dive into hospitality, pre, during, and after COVID, and I hope to see you back then. Thanks for being with us. Thanks for being with us, jury. Goodbye, all of you. Take care.
Robert.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
I'm gonna miss all my new friends.
Bye.